Creating is hard as hell, but community can make all the difference. Join We Create Daily, our community of storytellers of all kinds who, like you, are looking to advance their craft, careers, and creativity. Join our membership community today at thecreatedaily.com. That's thecreatedaily.com. And make your creative journey a little easier alongside like-minded storytellers just like you. I talk a lot about our ability to sit in our emotions and our feelings so that we can translate and transfer them onto the page and onto the screen. I think sometimes we want to bypass those feelings, but how can we really write grief if we don't allow ourselves to sit in it and be with it and feel the nuances of it? We did it.
Woo, woo.
We're here. We are here with a whole podcast. A whole podcast. Not half a podcast. A whole podcast.
That's right. 100.
Welcome to the Creative Cut Up Podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. I'm Felicia Pride, a writer, director, producer, head honey and honey child, and head storyteller of the Create Daily, a platform I founded in 2012 to help storytellers, especially those of us who are historically excluded, thrive creatively and professionally. And I'm here with my co-host because we got some cutting up to do.
We sure do. I'm Dria Rowland, the creative executive at Honey Child and a writer and producer.
Yes, she is.
And I'm Georgette Pierre, a voice actor and producer. You can hear it, right?
Oh, we hear that voice,
right.
honey.
Oh,
we
yeah.
hear the voice.
Oh, yeah.
So join us weekly where we talk shop and smack and share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And from 3 different perspectives, which I love, providing tangible tips to support your creative practice, your career, and your artist self. Because we all know that being an artist is hard as hell.
Oof, say that.
But the Creative Cut Up is here to help. Shall we begin, ladies?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Welcome to a new installment of the Creative Cut Up Podcast. We already cutting up, and we just getting started. Already cutting up. It's live.
Listen. Oh, man.
We have a whole podcast. We got episodes.
We rolling.
And everything. I hope you all have tuned in to every single episode. If you haven't, you can always go back and check out our episodes starting from our first one. But we've been talking about all kinds of awesome things, from how to deal with your reps to writing short films to the writing process, craft. We're going there. So super, super excited about what's to come.
Same.
And thank you to everybody who's been listening. I've been getting some great feedback. I'm sure you guys have as well.
People have been showing a lot of love. A lot of love.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And if you love it, please rate and review. The reviews help a lot. And also tell a friend. Sharing is caring. Speaking of, I really have an obsession with Care Bears. You guys know Care Bears?
Fucking love the Care Bears. Okay.
Oh my gosh. It's something about them caring through their bellies that really, and when they come together and they care through their bellies, and they stop bad stuff through their bellies. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed about the Care Bears, which I think is such a great segue into what we're talking about today.
It actually is.
Which is therapy and the artist. We're kind of talking about the relationship between the two, relationship between being an artist and our shit, right? I think this is a very important topic. It also is something that at the Create Daily is important for us to talk about the relationship between craft and our shit and our lives and how they're all interconnected. So I'm super excited to dive in today.
Mm-hmm. That's so important.
Yes.
We about to get
I love our segue being Care Bears, though. I really do.
Oh, they have a movie on Netflix, honey. It is the best.
Yeah, I never watched Care Bears growing up.
I had blankets.
Well,
I had all of that.
It's not too late.
It's not. It isn't.
What we're saying is it's not
Care
too
Bears,
late.
stare with us,
Thank
Dria.
goodness.
Talk about, I feel like the world needs Care Bears right now, actually. This is such a good time to be getting caught up and getting down with Care Bears because, again, they care, love, they all have their different little sort of themes that they represent.
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And I think that the love that they bring to the world is needed right now, is what I'm saying. So Dria, get on it. Netflix. I believe it's on Netflix, the Care Bear movie.
And I ain't gonna hold you, Dria, to be honest, like the 80s version of Care Bears looks a lot better to me, but
really,
get your entry point however you get it for the Care Bears, okay?
Yeah, however you get
I want the OG.
Yeah. But, why I think therapy is so important, I'll take it back to 2016. I was in the Film Independent Screenwriting Lab for what would become Really Love. And we were having a session, and I can't remember if my father was sick at this point or not, but we were having a session, and all I remember, I can't remember why, but I just started bursting out in tears. Now, I was the only Black person in the room. So crying in front of a bunch of blonde Black people is not how I wanted to spend that night, that evening. Do you know what I mean? Just like crying so vulnerable in this space. I wish I could remember what happened, but I remember Ruth. Ruth is my story editor. That's how I originally met Ruth afterwards, just being so kind and gracious. But it was the connection between why I was crying is between what was happening in my life and just the work and the vulnerability that's required to be an artist and to share work and to expose work. And I was just crying. And I'm not a crier in that way. I like to cry on my own to release emotion, but I'm not a crier in that way to be crying in front of folks. So I was very embarrassed, but it kind of started me on this journey thinking about the relationship between our shit, our lives, our emotional lives, the interior of our lives, and that connection that has with our art and our work. Not long after that, I got into Writers on the Verge. And during that process, my father died. And that really, I was going through the death and grief, also going through a very traumatic time in the business, learning how nutty this business really is, in a really toxic relationship. And I was like, I'm about to lose my mind. I need to get some help. I had no money. I remember a friend was like, you really need to get some therapy, and actually paid for therapy sessions for me. And I started working with Dr. Ty, who's a Black woman therapist. And I've been working with Dr. Ty since then. So it's been consistent every month. Back then it was twice a week, but every month I've been working with Dr. Ty since 2017. And I didn't realize how much stuff I was holding on to, not processing, but also not bringing to the work. And I'm not saying bringing to a work in an unhealthy place, because we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, that I could see a lot of artist shit on the screen. It's like, can you go to therapy and not drag us through this 2-hour movie about your daddy problems? You know what I mean? Not like that. I mean, the emotionality that our lives have given us, bringing that to the page, bringing that depth to the page. And I wasn't doing that. I felt like my work before really digging into therapy and self-work was much more surface than it's become now. But that was sort of my entry point, was crying in that. So then my father's deceased, and I signed up for this class taught by a very kooky teacher who teaches story from a very kooky way. And it was 3 weeks fresh. My father had died 3 weeks. And I remember the intake form was like, is there anything we need to know? And I was like, yeah, my father died. I think I should be fine. And then the girl who recommended the class to me was like, oh, just a heads up, the class is really intense. Like the day before the class. I was like, wait, what? Excuse me, come again? She's like, oh, it's really intense, but you'll be fine. So first day of the class, we have this exercise where we have to go around and look people in their eyes and just look in their souls. And I was like, okay, I was doing okay. And I remember I stopped at a writer who is now a great mentor to me. We just stopped. I looked at her eyes. I start crying. Again, bunch of white people. I'm like, this is the second time. This is too much. But that weekend started to like use my pain, because the teacher came over, like, what's going on, blah, blah. Started to use my pain in a way that actually was very freeing to me at that point. So I started to really get serious about the connection between therapy and art. And that's what I would love to kind of dive in even more today about those things. I don't know if you've all had any experiences as artists of how life or therapeutic practices have really opened your eyes about things?
I definitely did. So when we were talking in one of our episodes about the writing process and the classes I was taking, I remember when I was taking some of these writing classes, I was like, okay, yeah, I got a story I want to tell. But as I started going through therapy, unpacking generational trauma, and I even add on womb trauma, right? Because sometimes people don't necessarily talk about the trauma that happens to women bodies, right? That have been passed down from generation to generation. So not only is there generational trauma in my family and my lineage, there's also womb trauma. So sexual assault and things of that nature. And so when I started working in my class, like the 102, I was like, oh, I know what this pilot is. It's me trying to work through my shit with my mom and our generational age differences. Mm-hmm. Because my mom is this 70-year-old West Indian woman stuck in her ways, but she also grew up a certain way. And then here I am, free as fuck. I'm like, what? Mommy, I can do what I want. I am doing what I want. No, I don't want children at 35 because I don't want to repeat the traumas. And so it was this push and pull because she just thought because I was a certain age, I should have been popping out babies. I was like, to do what with, Mommy? I'm still trying to, what we doing, right? Just to have, where the baby's gonna go? Oh, this pilot has to be me working through my shit with my mom, along with some romantic personal shit that I was throwing in there. And it started feeling like, oh, I understand why this story needs to happen. Because we have to also write a statement, this story, like why this story. And I remember clearly it was like, because I know I am not the only person still processing things. And I want this story to be a window or a gateway for other people to navigate the things that they're processing, whether it's familial relationships, whether it's personal relationships, whether it's still the death of a loved one, something. And so that was very loud to me after I started doing the healing work and that drop in, that spiritual download came and it's like, no, the generational trauma, Georgette, is stopping with you. I'm like, well, bitch, y'all need to give me a blueprint, ancestors, because I can't be the only one trying to figure this out down here. And so that's been kind of what I've been moving through and that coming out in my work.
That's so fascinating. What was the process then of writing? Did you feel what was happening while you were writing? How did it impact the writing process?
Oh, absolutely. So to share a little bit of it. So what I did was I started leaning into my connection spiritually to ancestors. I think there's some clear audience happening, meaning that I can hear messages and I'll have dreams visually. They'll send messages and downloads to me. And so I wanted the pilot to start at some point where I was this distant daughter that moved on to college and didn't really want to be at home because my relationship with my mother was so torn. And my sister that was dying was the one that like, hey, sister, I'm dying and you're going to have to figure this out with Mommy. And so I found a way to bring my sister in. And every time, like she was this spiritual piece that was lingering. And my character at the time didn't really know that she could hear her sister, connect with her sister. But as I was talking about some things that happened with my sister right before she passed away, I was done. But I also realized the release had to happen because it felt like I could get to the meat and the authenticity of what was happening, what I was feeling, or what my character was feeling as she learned literally 5 days before her sister was about to pass away. Because that actually happened in real life. I got the call. My mom was like, your sister's dying. I was in the midst of flying back from LA in New York for work. And she was like, you need to come home. And I was like, what do you mean I need to come home? Well, such and such is dying. I was like, but I was just with her. I just saw her. Right. Like, wow. And it was like, boom. Came, she was gone in the next few days. And I wanted to bring that into the pilot script with me. And so, yeah, I was in tears. I was literally, because I could hear her, I could feel her, but she was also, it felt like she was sending me messages to put into the script as well, because there were some things happening on the other side. And she was like, no, sister, do this, write this, no, add this. And so I felt like she was also part of the script writing process.
That's beautiful and painful at the same time. I talk a lot about our ability to sit in our emotions and our feelings so that we can translate and transfer them onto the page and onto the screen. I think sometimes we want to bypass those feelings, but how can we really write grief if we don't allow ourselves to sit in it and be with it and feel the nuances of it? So I can imagine how feeling that experience was, all the feeling of it.
Ever wonder how a novel went from the page to the screen? how an entire film derived from a great magazine article, or how you get the life rights to tell the story of that fascinating person you met or historical figure you're obsessed with. Learn the process in our new on-demand course called Based On, how to adapt books, articles, and real-life stories for film and TV. Led by myself, Felicia Pride, and Dria Rowland, Honeychild's creative executive and co-host of the Creative Cut Up podcast, you'll learn the process of optioning and developing IP for adaptation, the nuances of 3 different types of adaptations: books, articles, life rights, all the development jargon, what Honeychild looks for and how we source, search, and track IP, plus the answers to all of your burning questions. We'll break down the ins and outs of adapting IP and more. You'll get immediate access to our on-demand course for 6 months upon registration. So sign up today at thecreatedaily.com.
That's so powerful. I feel like I had an experience that showed me why therapy and processing your feelings is so important for your art. So I took a writing workshop at Yale, and our instructor said, it was an essay writing workshop, and she said, write from your scars, not your wounds. So when you're writing from your wounds, that's that fresh, raw, intense pain. And people can relate to that too, but that's kind of you getting that out. Art and writing involves reflection. It involves those lessons that you get with time and distance and perspective. And so it involves editing and shaping it. And so, that first rush, whatever is feeling you're going through, it is helpful to get it out. But when you look at, shaping it into art and taking it to the next level, and I was like, what did I learn from this? What do I want to say about it? And so writing from your scars when you've had a little bit of time to heal versus your wounds was a really powerful lesson.
I love that, because I can tell that a lot of people are writing from their wounds. There's a lot of anger, and there is definitely a rightful place for anger in art, but the anger is so, it's hard to cut. Yes. And it's hard to cut through as an audience. And then you're like, should I be here right now? This feels like this is a personal,
right?
Like they feel like they're going through it, working it out on screen. I feel like I'm like, should not be here during this process.
Right. Am I eavesdropping? This is intimate.
Right. Into your hatred of women. I feel like this should be something you deal with on your own. So, but I love that idea of writing from the scars, because there is both the understanding of the pain, but there is a shaping of it that sounds very intentional, which I think is great.
Felicia, the experience with your dad, and you were in those writing programs at that time, did you feel like you channeled that into the art that you're producing at the time, or was it something that took you a little time and space to see in a page?
I actually did. My next pilot, the pilot that got me into NBC Writers on the Verge, was about my dad. So my dad had been sick off and on for many years. He had Hodgkin's disease and was also a drug addict for many, many years. So we had an up and down relationship, but towards the end of his life, we were very close and were able to reconcile that relationship. But I was like, how do I write about this? How do I write about my dad? The way that we even started to reconcile actually was through a book project. So I had to approach my relationship with the father as a journalist, as a writer, in order to gain context about his life, in order to decenter myself and center him, right? So I was able to kind of be like, okay, he's more than just shitty dad. He's a full-fledged person. He used to be a little boy with dreams and aspirations. What happened? And so that book process and the gift that he gave me was honesty, vulnerability, and openness. I'll tell you anything you want to know. And it was very painful for him, very painful for us, but it really, on the other side of it, gave me so much perspective. He still was a shitty dad, it didn't take that away, but I was able to have context, and we were able to form a different type of relationship, which I was very grateful for. But when I was like, okay, in the TV space, how do I write about this? It came out as a pilot that I love. And it's a pilot called Magical Thinkers. You either love it or you hate it. It's what I've found people, because it's so quirky, but it's basically takes place in the 80s in Baltimore. My father was a salesman. He sold Amway and Herbalife back in the day. He was very successful at it for a certain period of time. So it's about a man who is trying to get back on his feet and reconcile his relationship with his daughter by starting a bootleg Herbalife competitor, essentially called NutriDream, with his brother, who moonlights as an armed robber. And they started with dope boys and sex workers. The sex workers become their sales force. adult boys are their sales force. And that's what they start. And it's very weird. And it's funny. It's a half hour. It's a comedy. But that was my way in of writing about my father and mine relationship. Here's this man trying to reconcile his relationship with his daughter. And that was my way in of, because I couldn't write like the on the nose drama. And that wasn't my father either. So that was the way in that I found. And it was through therapy and he and I reconciling our relationship that I was able to even get there.
I was going to add, that is one of the wonderful benefits of therapy to me, is that it gives you a different perspective or a different context. It kind of helps you to pull back those layers, or, you know, like you said, maybe you of yourself would have saw him just as a shitty dad, but now you can step back and have some empathy and see him as a human and see these other things as well. So for, you know, sometimes therapists, they just be sitting there not giving you nothing. It's like, girl, like, I feel like I'm working so hard today. But sometimes
they sitting there quiet, honey.
Then every once in a while they'll step up and say something that's like a little zinger, like, oh, okay, you saw something I didn't see, you know, or you saw a different level. So it can be helpful in that way, just to have somebody to present you. I wouldn't call it a blind spot. It's just your perspective. And so somebody else's perspective can really give you a fuller picture if you allow it to.
Which, if you think as an artist, that's what we want, right? How do we make everyone's perspective in this story interesting and unique and valuable? And if we can't do that in our own lives, or we have trouble with it in our own lives, therapy helps us do that. The other thing that I think therapy helps with is not just from the craft standpoint, but from a confidence piece, right? I think that a lot of artists deal with a lot of things that are eventually taken advantage of by the industries we work in, right? Whether that is because we're vulnerable, or we're people pleasers, or we are deeply insecure. Therapy can help us with those traits that I feel like the business takes advantage of. And it helps, for me, therapy really helped me with my self-worth issues, so that I could have a confidence when I go into rooms. I have a confidence on the page. I have a confidence in negotiations. I have a confidence with my team that I did not have several years ago at all. So I feel like those are some of the things that we don't talk about enough when it comes to, and this doesn't have to just be about therapy, because my other self-care practices include hiking. I talk about this all the time. Hiking every week is my church with my homegirl. Meditation, yoga, shadow work, all the things. It doesn't just have to be therapy, but the excavating of the shit of our shit and going deep in ourselves has really helped me navigate the business in more ways than one.
And to that confidence piece, it can also legitimize your feelings, because a lot of times you're questioning, is this valid, what I'm feeling? Am I the only person going through this? And so to go through therapy and have your feelings validated and affirmed, and okay, somebody else might resonate with this too, or give you that confidence to even speak up and share what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to add, I'm curious on how you all have moved through this too. Therapy, and even just the personal work on myself, has also allowed me to interact with other people's work differently and see other people's work differently. I'll find myself, whether it's going to a museum or going to an art exhibit or going to a performance show, whatever the case may be, and just kind of in allowing myself to be immersed in the vulnerability, the intentionality that's happening, or whatever the thing is. And it's also been a fix on, I may have been stuck on ideating around something. By the time I've left this exhibit, a whole bunch of downloads come in on like how I can fix the thing that I was stuck on. And so I know at least therapy has allowed me to enter experiencing other artists' work differently as well.
I love that. I feel like I've really been on a visual art kick lately, mainly painting, and especially painting that is comfortable in chaos has become so fascinating to me because I think that's life, right? Being able to be comfortable in chaos, and when you can capture, or you can capture like an orderly chaos, is painting is just fascinating to me. So I love that change of perspective or openness when it comes to others' art, for sure. I also think that it has made me hypersensitive though to people's stuff.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, let me back away because your shit is loud and I'm going to pray for you, but I need to back away. Do you know what I mean? I think that both my sensitivity has been heightened, but also my tolerance has decreased. Mm-hmm. I think one thing we don't talk about enough with self-work is that it can be lonely. lonely work when you're in it for sure, but also lonely work as you're growing. I think evolution can be lonely. And I think it's not something that we talk enough about or a lot about.
I need that on a button. Evolution can be lonely.
Yeah.
For real.
Well, because everyone's not necessarily parallel in the work that you're doing, and not to say that you're ahead of them or you're behind them. It's just you are where you are, and some people are just not in a place to be able to navigate their own shit because it's tough. I'm sitting here looking at my therapist and she was like, girl, they don't want to talk to you. I'm like, what you mean they don't want to talk to me? You're just trying to navigate the things, but you're hearing through and you're like, oh gosh, okay, so this is something that I need to look at differently. I need to refine the tools that maybe were formed during my season of trauma. These tools don't work anymore because they were built or used during time of trauma. So what do those new tools look like? And those tools may not be applicable to those that may not be on the same trajectory healing wise as you.
That's deep, Georgette. I think it's kind of some of what you're speaking to. It's a frequency. Art is energy. And so there are some things that you take in and your spirit just clashes with it or it doesn't resonate. And some things that you just vibe with organically. It's like we're on the same wavelength. I used to feel like I didn't understand visual art. So your point, Felicia, you were talking about getting really immersed in painting and fine art. I used to be like, this is over my head. And then now I go to exhibits all the time and it's a feeling. Like I don't necessarily have to make sense of it. It's not an intellectual thing. It's speaking to me energetically for some reason or another. And Georgette, you mentioned earlier being more sensitive to other art. I think it's that too, is like you understand or appreciate what it takes to be vulnerable as an artist now when you actually go there yourself. When you see there are times like, okay, maybe you thought you was being honest, but when you actually go there now, you can really appreciate other people when they go there. And even again, it's not necessarily a like or love or hate with the art, but it's an appreciation for the intention and the appreciation that you went through this experience of sharing your soul with us.
I also think too, Dria, to that point, there's this level of just surprise element, right? Like you're seeing these artists lay out their stuff. And sometimes I would have a vision of how I think something should have been laid out or how I may have wanted to interact with it. And then my soul ends up hitting it. My spirit ends up connecting with it completely differently. So I actually love going to exhibits like Basquiat or whatever thing is by a Black artist, or I just want to be immersed in it because I want to know and feel what comes up, like what happened or what am I connecting with in this work that they're essentially laying their shit bare. And there's something to be said about that. And I don't think a lot of artists are able to do that. And so for those that do that, there's a respect that I have and a level of inspiration as well.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because the writer's room is a place where I don't think people realize how much vulnerability, particularly in drama rooms. I've never been in a comedy room, but how much vulnerability is like part of it. Like we're sitting around all talking about our parent issues and what happened, like sharing really intimate stories that then end up on screen, and it's kind of a mind fuck. We're like, oh yeah, that was what happened with my dad, or that's that situation that happened when I was 12. So I think being able to even share is a breakthrough that I had to have, and therapy helped me do that because I think there's so much shame. But I think that's the other thing that therapy helped me to work through was the shame that I had around certain experiences that I've had in my life. And not being ashamed of shit that I've gone through. Because I used to hold so much shame. I think that shame kills. So that helped me tremendously. And then also when we talk about other artists, it also has helped me to have tremendous respect for actors. Because when you think about what we are asking actors to do, is wild, right? We're like, okay, what we want you to do is, first of all, hop into an emotion within, in the next 2 minutes, right? Hop into rage, just get into it, just be rageful, but not too rageful. And do it in front of 150 people, you know what I mean? And do it well. So when you think about actors' temperament, because it's so funny, you can tell actors and writers off the bat, like, we're in the corner and actors are performing, you know what I mean? Like in their daily life, but like, why? Because of what's required to do what they do, and it's a tall order that we're asking for them to do. So that respect of them laying bare, right, their craft themselves, what they need to do to get to rage, whatever experience they may need to channel or whatever their process is quite amazing. And I just feel like artists don't give enough fucking credit. We're put on a pedestal and disrespected at the same time. But it's like what we do makes the world go round. You know what I mean? And the way that it just connects folks and helps illuminate experiences. But yeah.
And also on multiple
I would
takes,
agree with
right?
that.
Like they got to do that multiple times. You know?
And give us a version. Give us a happier rage. Can you do more happy?
If you think about it, as a writer, you're a degree removed, right? But as an actor, it's your face that people are seeing. And so even if you're a character, people are still going to think it's you. Like that probably makes it even harder. Like, you know, what you're embodying, people are going to associate it with you because they're seeing your face. So I really just have all the respect in the world for actors. And I went to an improv show and I was like, I couldn't do this, just stand up on stage in front of a room full of people, just make something up off the top of my head. And it got to make sense and entertain people. I'm like, oh, y'all brave. Y'all brave.
So, Georgette, you mentioned new tools as you grow. What are some of your go-to tools now as you're going through your own personal journey?
I want to shout out my friend because he was helping me unpack the fact that I needed to refine my tools since the tools I was using still even on this side of healing wasn't working. One thing that I am moving on to the other side of is literally tapping into my community and asking if they have bandwidth, because I am trying to work through things in my mind, resolving things from the same place that the problems were created from, right? Isn't that the definition of insanity? And it was just like, well, Georgette, you're trying to solve these same problems from the same place that created them. And so he was just like, just ask if I have bandwidth. And if I have bandwidth, by all means, we can talk through whatever you need to talk through. And I was like, yeah, but I didn't want to bother you. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. He was like, but you didn't ask me either, right? I may have the space for it. I have also been thinking about other mindfulness things that I can be doing. So I've been taking swimming lessons, and that has allowed me to really unplug and just be in joy, be in support, the water supporting me. And so looking at other things that I can do that gets me out of the physical space that I'm so used to being in all the time. I need to get outside. I need to go walking. I need to go swimming. I need to just do something different, Georgette, than what you've been doing from New York, from the Ruta to the Tuta. Like, you've been doing this. So how are you going to interrupt some of these things to retrain your brain to think about things differently?
I love that, especially the swimming lessons. I think that one thing that helped me with the grief when my father died was taking yoga, because I feel like grief is an out-of-body experience. And I feel like I was so disconnected from my body. And I think also as an artist, the connection to the body is so important for both writers and actors and other artists. I think about actors literally are embodying, right? They're not acting, they're embodying. For me as a writer, I'm trying to embody as a way to figure out if this rings true. And so in order to do that, I personally need to be in my body. I need to feel my body. So I love that you've been taking swimming lessons. I feel like yoga has been such a huge part of my therapeutic practice and a huge part of my creative practice to make sure that I'm in my body. Because a lot of times we're too much in our head as artists, especially as writers, where it's like, okay, let me get in my body and see if this is actually making sense.
Yeah, I love that thank you for saying that, because just to give people context, I have been dissociated longer than I've been embodied longer. And so what do you do when you've been dissociated, disconnected from your body for 15 years and you've only been in your body for 2? And so, and you're talking about it on the latter parts, teenage years, but even if I add those years, then we're talking about longer than 15 years. And so been finding more things to get into my body, to your point, Felicia, because this is where I've always started. And it's like, my body's like, no, pay attention to us. Heart is pattering and the legs is like, girl, you're doing too much. Or my womb is doing something. My arm is like, don't sleep that way. So it's literally been thinking about how to embody and be more present in my body moving forward.
I love that. This has been a really amazing, insightful, important episode. I would say I talked a little bit about my tools, but things that can connect me, to your point, Georgette, spiritually, things that I can connect emotionally, things I can connect communally with my community, and then things that help connect me physically are a lot of my tools. So, but I realized with being an artist and also being an artist in a business like Hollywood, I need to do these things consistently. Like
That part.
There is no pause. You can tell when there's been a break with the work, right? When you haven't been doing the work. Personally, for myself, I'm like, uh-oh, I feel it emotionally. I feel it in the body, all that. So this is like an ongoing writing every day folks talk about, and it helped me to get back on creative track, but also doing the work nearly every day is what helps to keep me together.
Ashe.
Seriously, I relate so much to what y'all are saying. I used to hear that phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I'm like, that's such a cliche, but no, it's not. You have to refill and replenish yourself daily. Like you're saying, it has to be a consistent process of connecting with yourself and taking care of yourself. And yeah, it's you have to keep it up.
Motherfuckers will drain you, okay? If you allow them to.
The business will drain you. Life will drain you. Your family will drain you, right? You're constantly just being asked to pour in your life. And so how do you intentionally pour back into yourself so that you can create at the level that you're proud of?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I think that's such a great way to take us into our segment that we like to call How We Create, which is where we share all forms. We share all forms of inspiration that may have stopped us in our tracks, made us laugh, had us shouting, or even reminded us to rest.
You were talking earlier about being inspired by different types of art. And so what I do almost every day is listen to DJ sets. I love selection radio. Ooh. I'm always on SoundCloud, Mixcloud. Like, I love the way hearing like the connections that DJs make. I love the sonic journeys that they take us on. So when I need to lock in, get work done and vibe, like I'm putting on like just something random. Like, I don't know what's happening next. And I love that about it. And it's really inspiring. Like, I'll be Shazamming like, what is this? What is this? And also
Selection radio is amazing.
Come on.
Where do you get that from? Where do you get Selection Radio?
You can listen to it on SoundCloud. They do a live show for 2-hour show every Sunday on Apple Music, and then they repost it on SoundCloud. Mm-hmm. It's a vibe. What about y'all?
Shout out to my friend Paige. So we went to a drag performance show in Brooklyn. I was like, well, Georgette, you keep working. Like, get the hell out and go just be inspired. And so it was drag queens and drag kings. That was the first time I heard about drag kings. And these people were just performing in all of their vulnerability. I just remember sitting there and thinking about what it took for them to just come out here and lay their soul bare. So it was called Synthesis. Shout out to Miss Jade. She put it together, and she was really about inclusivity, intentionality of the diversity of artists that perform. She performed herself. And I just remember being so moved by just one performance. It was by a drag king, and he literally, I thought I was about to cry. It was just, again, when you're performing, you're literally laying your shit bare. And the fact that you're coming out, singing these songs, performing these songs, however you perform, I think it's also kind of some form of therapy for them too. That's what it felt like when you saw that. And it came across that way. So that is my inspiration for this week. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Speaking of visual art, I used to live in West Hollywood, and there was this cafe that would do these rotating art shows. And they had an art show with pieces by Percival Everett. For those of you who don't know, Percival Everett is the author of Erasure, which was the basis for American fiction. And Percival is one of my favorite authors. His writing and his imagination is in a different plane. It's just wild. I think his imagination is wild. But to see his work, that he was also a visual artist, I had no idea. And I was like, oh, wow. And it was its own voice, its own style. And I was just super, super inspired. This was maybe like a year and a half ago when I saw it, but I was remembering it, thinking about Erasure and all of that. And just when artists also have things that other disciplines that they work in, and they work in them differently, is just also really inspiring to me.
Agree. That's awesome.
Well, thank y'all for tuning in to new installment of the Creative Cut Up podcast. We have so much fun cutting up with y'all. So thank you so much again. If you love it, tell a friend, review it. The reviews really, really help. Spread the word. Sharing is caring, like our friends, the Care Bears. Yes. And we will see you next time. Peace.
What is the purple one? Bye, y'all.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Cut Up podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. Listen to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you dig it, subscribe, rate, review, and please tell a friend. If you need help getting back into your creative practice, check out the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal. You can also join our newsletter and our We Create Daily community, both of which provide even more resources and opportunities to thrive creatively at thecreatedaily.com. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at The Create Daily. Acting on your ideas is a form of self-love. And when I decided to write the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal, it was with you in mind. Storytellers with stories inside of you that you need to get out into the world. But life, fear, uncertainty has a way of leaving us stuck. But no more. It's time to reclaim our creative practice and get unstuck. The Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal can help you get back on creative track. 30 days of dynamic prompts, exercises to stimulate creativity, alongside motivational quotes, journal pages, and more. If you're ready to create again, get your copy of the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal today at creativecomeback.com. That's creativecomeback.com. Because it's never too late to become the artist you always wanted to be.